Welcome back to the Backcountry PA podcast. On this one, we sat down with Greg. I'm not going to try and pronounce the name. Don't want to mess up the last name.
Yeah.
Ethan, you want to try?
Nope.
Okay. Greg from Whitetail Partners.
Yes.
He was on for land management a couple episodes ago. As in podcast land, it would be like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
All right. So he was on for this one for e-scouting. E-scouting for like the rut time frame, big woods in general. But man, it was very informative. It was definitely an episode that Ethan just had to soak it in because I feel like Ethan doesn't really scout too much, right?
Really don't.
Yeah.
My brain's kind of turned
anyway.
off. Yeah, e-scout. Yeah. My brain's kind of turned off this time of year for deer. So.
Yep. So you start your scouting around September timeframe.
Oh, yeah.
So the one thing that people want us to add into each like podcast is like what we're doing this time frame. So like June, it's June 27th right now. When this comes out, it's going to be July. So July, August time frame.
Yep.
So what are we doing in July, August time frame that we are like, would you be doing in July, August for whitetails to prep?
Honestly, as of late, I've been really curious into controlled burns. Mm-hmm. So I've been looking at some areas on the property to do some of those, asking questions to the people that have done them. Mm-hmm. So I think soon, heading up to the cabin, 4th of July weekend, I might get some areas prepped, do some more of land management.
Yep.
Get that going on. And right now, as of this episode,
June 27th.
On June 20th, I've taken a lot more interest in the e-scouting aspect of things. So I'm sure I'll be doing that now. And I have cameras to check that I haven't touched since December of this past year. Mm-hmm. So kind of just doing that. Kind of getting more into the whole
slowly getting your foot wet.
Yeah, getting the deer mindset, getting ready for opening day of archery, and I mean, obviously still going fishing, but that's always.
I mean, checking cameras that you haven't checked in a while, that's probably a good one to do. Refresh those batteries. If there's a good sign there, refresh them,
Yep.
Mine is e-scouting still. I'm always e-scouting. I don't think there's a time when I'm not e-scouting.
Yeah.
Certain areas, like trying to break it down, micro, macro type stuff. And then, honestly, like most of my cameras are out. Just like letting them soak, maybe making little changes here or there, checking them July, August timeframe, seeing if it should stay there or not. Have some close to ag, so I might take them away eventually because there's no point in having them there. But that's mostly what I'm doing. Maybe moving cameras, placing new cameras, moving cameras for the season to see like what they're doing there. Finding they're still scouting a bunch, so they can go out and scout. But yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to be doing July, August timeframe. And then, I think we'll keep putting those in the intros right now because people like hearing that kind of stuff, I guess. Yeah. I mean, we're nobodies really, but sure, if they like hearing it, why not?
Hear it? I'll tell you.
We're here for the people, Yes. So on this episode with Greg, we start off by talking about thermals and wind. Because we never really talked about that on any of the episodes. So we talk about thermals, wind, some experiences we've had with thermals and wind in general. Mostly thermals. We talk about thermals more than wind. How wind can play a factor in it too. We talk about a little bit. Then we dive into like the e-scouting part of things, of like how he gets started with it, what he looks at first, how he uses the map to assist him. Pretty much, like, does he look from a wide angle or like kind of close in? He starts out from the wide and moves in. We actually, in the YouTube video, you can actually see how we break down a certain area, why he likes a certain area. You might actually find out where this is. I don't know. If you're really that good, you might actually figure out where it's at. Or if you know the area, you might know where it's at.
Yeah.
So then we talk about short rut hunts, or like short hunts in general, really. If you only have a certain amount of days to go out hunting, how would we do it? What would we do? Or like, how would we scout versus hunt, or just scout? What would we do in that kind of situation?
Yeah. And then we look at the different layers of the new features on OnX that they've updated, and kind of help break it down, when it comes to scouting, like, okay, if I predict that there's going to be some scrapes or rubs up here or buck bedding, okay, how do they like to travel? You can physically look at it on the map and say, okay, picture out a game plan, and then put boots on the ground and see if it matches up.
And we kind of go through that too when we do that. I like point out certain features that I saw that they like to travel.
Talked about some overlooked areas, stuff that's not really talked about. Got to listen to find that out.
Hey, good job.
Yeah, see,
That's just giving it away right off the bat.
Yeah, could never.
Love that.
Don't do that. And and at the end, nutrition.
Yes, nutrition.
We do talk about that a lot.
Yeah, because obviously, I don't know how it's going to line up, but we have Weston on as well, and he's a big into fitness and all that kind of stuff. We didn't dive too much into nutrition with him, but on this one here, we dove into towards the end just a little bit of nutrition of like staying ready for the woods, because I had a crazy day with my nutrition the one day, almost passing out in the woods. It was not fun. Bugs, I got poison ivy. It was just
you're just a mess
It was a shitty day, and it actually turns out the one buck that I had on camera last year is actually on one of my cameras, and I'm like, well,
silver lining, right?
Yeah, but I'm never gonna hunt there again.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll throw like one sit at it.
Yeah, never
on a good wind. But he actually has a cut in his ear. He actually has like a cut in his ear.
So you can identify
I can identify him, yeah. So I have to look at the other pictures I have him to see if he had a cut then or not, to see if it's the same buck, because this guy has a really funky rack.
Battle Scar.
Yeah, Battle Scar. That's his name.
Scar. Battle Scar? Battle Scar?
Battle Scar.
Just Battle Scar.
Yeah, Battle Scar.
Okay.
Yeah.
BS.
All right.
Because it's some bullshit. You ain't hunting there.
Remember, guys, to go check out the partners in the description.
Yes.
There's some discount codes down there for you guys to save some money on some of this great product. Remember to like, subscribe, give us a rating and a review on Apple or Spotify. We really appreciate it. It helps us grow. It helps us, the podcast, reach more people. It also tells us what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. Really like the feedback. But remember to keep hunting.
Keep fishing.
And enjoy the freaking process. Ethan, you have to make a checklist. We're going to put a checklist right here.
Like, did you do this? check. Look, do me like a tiny little whiteboard right here, so
the
I can
smallest whiteboard they make.
I can check it off as you go. That way, okay, and then start fresh every podcast.
That's great.
We'll do that.
So, Greg, welcome back to the podcast. We had you on in podcast land. We had you on about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone who listened to that, it was a great episode, land management. Actually, before we started recording everything, I helped someone out at the conference with a land project this week.
Very cool.
Yeah. I was like, okay. Like he showed me he has like 80 acres. I think I have it actually the waypoint marked on Onyx, so I'll show you that after the episode. But so he has like 80 acres. It's all hardwoods. It's up near you, Ethan. So it's big woods.
Mm-hmm.
But he says he never sees deer on the property. He was like, the guy behind me always has deer on his food plots, all that kind of stuff. We don't have food plots. We have a pasture, but his brother leases like the pasture out to someone so they can put cows on the property. And I was like, well, you got to try and take some of that pasture back, first of all. He was like, yeah, we want to take the little back end away. And I was like, you got to put some switchgrass there between you and the cattle. And then to start out, do some clover so it builds that nitrogen up in that ground, and then get that, and then you'll just have them come right there and have good bedding, do some hinge cutting around it, and you'll have good bedding right there with water coming right through.
You. So Cody's looking for a career change, and he's going to be in contact with you for a new job here.
Right.
I would love that.
Oh, you would absolutely love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I would love that a lot.
Just to be out in the woods for a living. Your actual living, yeah.
Yeah, that would be...
You'd be happy about that.
That'd be absolutely sick. So, yeah, if there's any openings, let me know. I'll apply.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
He's like, yeah, maybe I'll have you come up and do some... have a look at it and see what you think. I was like, in my head, I'm like, what am I going to charge this guy?
Yep, for sure.
Be like,
start dialing it up.
just start off like, hey, you going to let me hunt here then?
Yeah. Well, he said, he was like, there's big buck around, but they just don't come onto our property. Yeah. He's like, he's never saw... Now, granted, the way he was talking, he kind of reminds me of, like, the traditional PA hunter. Like, just sitting in one spot in the stand, and every spot every year, that kind of thing. So I mean, I think if he changed up his ways a little bit and didn't sit in the same spot, he probably would see some more. So I mean, yeah.
But help him out.
But this episode is not going to be about land management, which I loved.
I'll try not to steer it that way again.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I knew you were coming back on, I was like, did I have any more questions?
At the end, you can ask him. How about that?
That's fine.
This one is probably one of the favorite things to me to do is e-scout. I love e-scouting. I love trying to get in the head of a deer of what way they would take. Like Ethan and I did, we sat here, I don't even know what night that was, but we sat here and we broke down because he has deer in certain area that come around during the rut. And he said, yeah, the camera was right here. And I was like, dude, look at this. And I was making lines on OnX of where they actually walk because of the easiest path a deer would take to, especially during the rut, to scent check everything. So what I really want to do is I sent you a waypoint and an area that we're going to break down. And it's kind of like the traditional PA big woods type thing where, a person may not have all the time in the world to go up there and scout, put boots on the ground, do all that kind of stuff. This may help them get in the right area to get where to go first,
Yeah.
Because e-scouting's fun. I think
It
it's really
is.
fun.
It's a lot of fun. It can be time consuming, but it's a lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah. So, Greg, I mean, do you want to introduce yourself maybe a little bit? Maybe, I don't know why people want to listen to that first one, but if you want to listen, introduce yourself just a little bit here.
Yeah. I won't go into the full breakdown that I did on that first one about kind of the whole journey to get to where I'm at. But I live down in Southern Ohio, and I help people design and manage whitetail properties in Ohio, surrounding states. Have my real estate license in Ohio as well, so I help people buy and sell hunting properties. That's the big part of what I do professionally. It's really all revolving around deer, and then my passions outside of that are really deer hunting related as well. I spend pretty much any and all of my free time scouting for myself, whether it be e-scouting, kind of like we're talking about today, or anytime I get that chance to go out and put boots on the ground. So just a big deer nut like a lot of other guys.
Yeah. So I know Ethan has that shut off time with whitetails. He has that time right after late season, he kind of shuts it off, and he doesn't come back until maybe around July, August time.
I'm not gonna lie, when we were doing the e-scouting, when we were, I got a little excited.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, this is okay. I'm ready to go up and put boots on the ground and put the trail cam. We got trail cameras to put up there. I got plenty now. I went through my inventory. We're good. I have enough.
I got 6 just sitting there.
Yeah, I know. I got them at the house. I was like, let's go. But I actually got excited because usually around this time of year, it's end of June
June 27th.
27th, we're recording this, and I'm not thinking about deer. I'm not. I'm thinking the property management. I'm doing that. And fishing. So I'm not thinking about deer, but then after you're like, oh, we're going to do some e-scouting, and we started looking around, around the cabin and the public land and everything. I was like, yeah, I'm actually excited about this episode because there's more areas that I could e-scout before I actually put boots on the ground up north. So yeah, I think I'm slowly getting into the deer mode here.
Yeah. So Greg, when does your is there an off switch for you? I mean, clearly with your job there can't be an off switch for you, but is there a time period where you kind of take a step back and kind of take your mind off it a little bit?
Oh man, I mean, collectively, no. If I'm looking at it as the big picture, not really. There's not really ever any kind of month or anything that I do turn it off. I do have other hobbies that I like to do. I like to run and hike and do things like that, and that's kind of my mental break, my little bit of checkout from it. But really, it's a full year thing for me now. I've really became consumed with it, just with it being my career now. But not only that, I just have a really deep passion for understanding deer behavior, and I can walk around the woods at any time and find myself satisfied, and I think I find more joy in the scouting and the learning than I do the actual hunting. The hunting's just kind of the cherry on top for me at this point.
Yes, I completely, because I was thinking about that the other day. I was I heard and I randomly listen to hunting podcasts once in a while. Like I kind of find myself not listening to it as much, but I listened to one the other day, and he would like it's just a whole process leading up to it. Like you get as much joy, if not more joy, out of the whole process leading up to like a possible harvest than anything. And I was like, I completely agree with that. Because like I think it was about people like skipping the work, wanting to not work as hard to get on deer. And it's like the best part is like that whole process leading up to it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
whether
absolutely.
whether it be property management, e-scouting, boots on the ground, like anything like that. It's just the whole process. Like to just like to go to like a penned-in area and be like, oh, I'm gonna just go hunt some
Yeah.
whitetails. That doesn't excite me.
Hmm.
Like it doesn't.
No.
So yeah, I completely agree with the whole process leading up to it, or like just the process in general is just fun. Just thinking about it, like I think the process starts with e-scouting a lot. Like
Yeah,
it
definitely.
100%. Like unless you have like a lot of history with this area, then you might not e-scout as much. Like down around here, I don't really e-scout that much because like I know the area already,
Right.
so it's like I don't need to. But before we get to e-scouting, I want to touch on this because I've kind of got a gist of thermals and all that kind of stuff. But for someone who doesn't know what thermals are, can you give a description of what thermals would be like in like the type of terrain that I sent you, the bigger woods type area?
Yeah. So I mean, in a real general sense, the easiest rule of thumb to follow is that those thermals are going to rise in the morning and they're going to set in the evening time. Uh, the intricacies of that are going to change depending on your area,
Mm-hmm.
and you can get way down a rabbit hole of how quickly they rise, how quickly they fall, whether you're on a north-facing slope, a south-facing slope, how steep the terrain is, how much foliage is on the trees. Like there's so many different layers that you can go down. So really the easiest way to look at it is they're going to go up in the morning, they're going to drop back down in the evening. And one of the best things that I do to really understand how thermals are working through an area is by using something like milkweed or another wind checker and dropping that at different times of the day, whether I am out there scouting or whether I am in the tree hunting, just actually trying to understand how that thermal pull is occurring in relation to whatever the said wind direction is. Because like on this piece you sent me or any
Mm-hmm.
other type of hill country, if you hunt it long enough, you realize that whatever that wind direction says on the map, it's
Mm-hmm.
likely not going to be how your scent carries, unless it's a very strong dominant wind. More than likely, you're going to get more influenced by those thermals. And from my experience, the thermals are more so how those bucks, especially the older bucks, like to navigate through the woods rather than that wind direction. They rely a lot more on those thermals.
Okay, yeah. Now, with the thermals, I've heard a lot of people say this, and I kind of felt it myself, but I'm not 100% sure. I want to know if you felt it too, or maybe even you too, Ethan. There's a certain time in the morning that they start to rise. Like, you can go out there, like, you're going up, the sun just starts rising. It's not really, the thermals aren't rising at that time yet. It's when the ground starts to heat up. I get thinking this like some with like when the ground temperature or the air temperature reaches above the ground temperature. Is that something like that? Is that right?
So I can't speak exactly. I don't
Yeah.
want to throw a misunderstood fact or a
Yeah.
wrong fact out there because I like to go under the idea of if I can look up something online, then I don't need to commit it to memory because that information will always exist. But what I can say is like in general, to go like a little bit further, what I said, rise in the morning, fall in the evening. I look at it like once that sun reaches that part of the ground and starts heating that up, that's when they're going to start to rise through that section.
Okay.
And then vice versa, the areas that get shaded first, or if you have other contributing factors like these steep ravines that
Mm-hmm.
have running water coming down, those are going to be areas that suck thermals down very early in the day compared to just a regular hill slope. So
Yeah.
that's just where it really, I found it to be the most beneficial for my own learning, is I just spent a lot of time out there with milkweed and just started dropping it and trying to see how it acted through the woods, and that taught me a lot about how exactly those finer details of the thermals work.
Yeah. There's one time I think it was hunting I think it was an east-facing slope. Like the front of the mountain was an east-facing slope, and I was up at the top. I mean, at the top before the sun rose or was just cracked pretty much. And all of a sudden, like there was no wind, and then all of a sudden I just go like it was a rush, and I was like, "There's no wind," and then all of a sudden, all these thermals just rise in front of me. Did you ever have that happen to you? Because like there was no wind at all. I was like,
Oh
"What the
yeah.
heck is going on?"
Yeah, I have countless numbers of stories now that I've accumulated from different hunts and different situations. One that sticks out to me the most was very similar, where there was a very light wind. This was actually like the first time I really understood that thermals have a bigger impact.
Hmm.
There's a light wind that should have been coming right over top of the ridge into the creek bottom I was hunting, but it was in the morning time. And what ended up happening was the thermals were pushing against the wind opposite, and they were going up the hill. And what it caused was this slight pooling reaction in the little creek bottom area I was hunting. So the whole morning I was sitting there thinking I'm okay. And then right before shooting light, I had a buck come through. I could see like the silhouette of his antlers. And right when he got into that pool area, he just blew out of there. And I spent the rest of the morning trying to understand why. And then that was like my turning point of like, oh, okay, these thermals mean a lot more than that wind direction does. So, it's those stories are unfortunate because they often lead you to look like more of a dummy than a smart person, but
Yeah.
they're necessary if you want to keep building as a hunter. I also feel like.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like I find it pretty interesting. Like because I saw there was I went to I think it was my lone rut vacation. Or it was like before you guys came up to the Big Mountain Challenge, one of the two.
Yeah.
But it was raining, and like I scouted this area out. I was coming down the mountain, it started downpouring. I had to get out of there because I was on the other side of the creek, and my truck barely made it over the first time. So I was like, I gotta get through this before it gets too heavy, and I can't get back over. And I'm like coming down the mountain, and this buck just crossed in front of me right there. So it was like the thermals were still would have been rising, but with the rain, they kind of kept it stagnant at that time because like the temperature on the ground wasn't any higher because it was staying neutral the whole time. And I was like, you can scout as much as you want, plan for a buck to come one way with the wind or the thermals, whatever, and then like you get messed up temperatures or weather like with the rain or snow. It's like it's it's a fun chess match of like
Yeah.
trying to figure these deer out, but then really it's like they always hold that queen
Yeah,
or that king,
absolutely.
whichever. I don't really play chess, so I don't know which is the higher one.
Yeah, that's I always try, especially like in rut hunting scenarios,
Hmm.
I always try to eliminate as many of those variables as possible. So I find myself getting attracted to very common land features. One of my favorite to hunt during the rut time frames are the drainage tops right at the tops of those ravines.
Okay.
Just because there is so much consistency for me that those steep ravines are always going to have that downward thermal pull, and there's always going to be a hotbed of activity on the top of that ravine because it's the easiest path of travel for close to sometimes depending on where you are, like here where that map you sent me, that's
Hmm.
600-700 feet of elevation, and you're talking about the first easiest place for them to travel within that 600 to 700 feet. And I know that my thermal pull is going to go right down that ravine. So it's not always the easiest, but I do know like I can walk right up that ravine, get right on the edge of it, and that's typically a pretty good rut funnel for me to hunt just because my scent's getting pulled away and I have a pinch point of deer travel right out in front of me.
Yeah, and also a lot of the time, like that area I sent you, a lot of the time up in that area, those ravines have some kind of water source as well. So like
Oh yeah.
that plays a role too. Like the
Yep.
deer, especially during that rut time frame, if they're traveling that, they need to at least drink some water when they're cruising as much as they are.
Hmm.
Like get some water on their cruise along the top right there. I mean, they need that. Like they're not eating as much. They're maybe browsing along once in a while, but most of the time they're going, like
Yeah,
they're moving.
absolutely.
So, yeah, I never actually thought about the top of drainage because I think that's. Would you say it's like an overlooked area that people don't really talk about too much? Put it that way.
Yeah, man, I don't know if it's necessarily overlooked. I think the biggest thing about it is it's like the ones that I hunt, they're just really a pain in the ass to get to. In all honesty, like the stuff that I climb up, I
Mm-hmm.
look at it sometimes. I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? Because
Yeah.
a lot of times you're going out there and you're already a couple miles away from vehicle, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
starting to climb up this drainage, and like there's an element of safety you got to take into consideration as well. But I don't think they're overlooked. But the right ones, in my opinion, are just really hard for you to get to.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, it's just there's not a lot of people that are going to go out there and do it. And I mean, that's another reason why I like hunting them so much, is just because I don't really ever see a lot of people in them in the first place.
Yeah, I mean I I think about that often as like, the easy route. Like you could take the easy route in, but then how many other people take that easy route in and bump those
Yeah.
deer out all the time? Sometimes like the first real mountain buck I got was this 6 point, and I took the hardest freaking way in,
Yeah.
and it was like straight up the mountain like this, and like I got 3/4 of the way up, and I was like, I don't go to church, I don't really pray, but I got there, I was like, dear God, please, should I just stop right here or should I keep going?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I made it this far, might as well keep going. And then I
Yeah.
got to rocks, and it was just terrible. And I
It's
got
worse.
that one there. I think I told on the podcast a few times, but like I got to this spot, and like 10 minutes later, I shoot him. Like I just see him go out of his bed, and he's just walking along, and I'm just sitting there. I'm still trying to cool off, and like my hat's off. Like I can see steam just rising off me
Yeah.
at the time because I'm
Your
just
thermals were
yeah, my
rising.
thermals are rising, which is probably good, right? Because like
Yeah.
if I was on the side of that mountain, all my thermals would have been rising right to him.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
beat him out of his bed, and my thermals are rising off me. He didn't know I was there.
Nope, clearly, because he's on your wall now.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Joke's on you.
I win. That one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a 2.5-year-old deer, like the first real like rack buck I really got.
Yeah.
And I was just so excited about it. Like it was like the coolest thing ever. Like that morning, there was actually 2 other bucks I saw in the same area that were probably bigger than him, and I was like, oh my gosh! Like the buck up in this area, like it just
Oh, yeah.
they're massive.
If you can get back to certain areas,
Yeah.
there's some tanks back there that
Mm-hmm.
no one's ever going to get because,
Yeah.
well, unless you go back,
Yeah.
You're crazy enough to go
I
back.
am crazy
so
enough.
Maybe one day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it would be good to like I never paid attention to this. I don't pay attention to this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I go in like, okay, here's a sign. Here's where I'll hunt. Where's the wind coming? And I leave it at that, and then I go hunt. But I guess knowing, because there's so many fingers and it just goes up and down, elevation changes. It's like maybe I should pay attention to these thermals. Probably would be a good idea because last year, opening day rifle, I was walking out to the point where all the scrapes and the rubs are and everywhere we
Oh,
looked.
the one you showed me.
The one I showed you, yep.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm walking right out to it because I was like, okay, I want to get here. Maybe something will come through. I don't know. I want to look over the edge and just sit there for a while before I walk around. And then a deer starts snorting at me.
Mhm.
I didn't even see it. And it was over the edge. And I'm like, my wind's good because the wind's not to my back, right? I was like, I'm doing good. But now I'm really thinking like, okay, I'm up top of like where the thermal's coming from, right? It's like just getting light. Like if a deer walked in front of me, I could identify it and shoot it kind of deal.
Mhm.
So I was like, now I got to figure out where the thermals are compared to where the wind's blowing.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be so complicated?
I think, yeah, I mean, it is well, we don't really, for me, Ethan and myself, like we were never really the whole tactical guys. Like we still
Still not.
we try, well, we try and be, but it's like it's a lot to learn on not so much. Like our dads taught us a good amount, like taught us the woodsmanship stuff and the getting into it, but like our dads were never really big into that. Like it was just like just go out and hunt. You have your spot you go to, and you just hope someone else pushes that deer towards you.
Yeah, or
Like
go
that's-
walk.
Yeah,
My
or walk.
dad was big in the walking. When not anymore. He's gotten the age where he's just like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
But I remember we would walk mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't matter what we were doing. whether it was rifle or even small game.
Yeah.
We would walk, and I'd try to keep up with him. It's like, oh my gosh. He's like, I've walked these mountains longer than you've been born. I'm like, thanks, Dad. Thanks. Now I'm the one doing it.
Yeah. But okay, so there's a lot of stuff you got to learn. So I want to kind of keep this as simple as possible for listeners who possibly don't really know what they're looking for, because I find that often, like people say, like, I need the generic ones, saddles, the drainages, the creek bottoms, all that kind of stuff. Like, but there's little nuances that I've found that you should be paying attention to, or some people are saying one thing and it's like, what does that really mean? Like saddles were kind of a huge thing, I don't know, like 3 years ago. Like that was a big, like, hunt the saddles, during the rut. You're going to see something going through there. But now it's kind of like you got to look past that. You got to like go to the saddle and like look around that, because you're not going to see the trails or the sign in that, the saddles anymore, because it's heavily pressured area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the main reasons is just there's such an increase in the amount of hunting content out there now that when people do want to learn, they turn to social media, they turn to Google, they turn to YouTube, they turn to all of these platforms that have all this great content from guys that are just straight up killers. And when you look at a guy and see, okay, he's tagged all of these big bucks and he says go hunt the saddle, well, I'm going to go look at that saddle. Well, everybody else also has access to that content you're consuming. So the element that we have to always take into consideration when we're hunting public land especially is, what are the other hunters doing and how is that affecting what these deer are doing? So not only am I looking for the features that I think the deer should use in a natural sense, but what is any kind of hunting pressure? How would they kind of shift off of that?
Yeah.
So that's where like e-scouting really comes into play for me, where not only do I want to like mark out all of those points of interest that I think that are going to be activities for deer, but where are all of the access points, and is there anything that's stopping the average person from getting back to those features? Because every single person has the ability to look at a map on their phone as often as they want to. So with that in mind, I have to try to think about where those people aren't going to be on top of where the deer are going to be.
Yep. And let me tell you, Greg, it is quite often that I look at onX and I look at the maps to see where I'm going to go. It is quite
Absolutely.
often. So, okay. So speaking of that, you said access points. So that's one thing that I think I've started looking at first, like trying to find possible access points or possible roads that people can drive back to get to a spot that, I want to check out. So is that like the first thing you look at as well?
Generally, yeah. I would say that if it's not access points, I typically, I guess, let me say, I like to mark out basic points of interest first. And those are typically going to be the obvious features, like your saddles, your drainage tops, things like that. And then also when you're just looking at satellite imagery, marking out like any vegetation breaks, whether that be a clear cut or a cedar thicket or anything that is some kind of break in habitat. I like to mark out those points of interest, and in accumulation, the access points are going to be a point of interest as well, because that tells me how I can get into these locations, and it also tells me how everybody else is going to get into these locations. So really just those general points of interest is always my starting point anytime I'm breaking down a new area on a map.
So would you start up high or down low?
That depends. So it varies on the area. And it varies on how intensively I'm going to be hunting that area. If I'm just going on like say like a rutcation and I have maybe 4 or 5 days, I'm just going to mark out those points of interest, and I'm going to spend the first part of my trip walking around until I find a hot enough amount of sign that I feel like I can hunt. But if it's more of an area like my home base here down in Ohio, where I'm spending a lot of time and I can go out there, and if I want to go and scout a ridge system, a whole ridge system that maybe is like a mile long. And I might go out there for one scouting trip and do the top, and I might do another one for the bottom. So my e-scouting is going to be relevant to both of that. Like if if I'm just generally e-scouting, I'll just drop points everywhere. But if I'm e-scouting to actually go out and put boots on the ground, like I'm planning out that route on top of all of those like just general features that I'm looking at. So I might go out for the top, then the bottom, or the bottom then the top. It just really all is going to depend on how much time I'm going to commit to it and what type of hunt I'm doing at the location as well.
I guess that would be a good point to point out. Like when you go in, say, like for example, for our deer camp, I think the map we're going to break down is kind of that area because we have someone coming from Ohio that has never hunted before. And it's like, you kind of want to get them in a good spot, also on top of yourself.
Yeah.
But like I don't have the time to go up there. Ethan, it's his camp, so like he can go up there quite often and scout as much as he wants. But like for me, it's like I'm trying to pick out waypoints that could be possibly a good high possibility of being successful in those spots just because of the terrain, because terrain plays a huge role in a deer's movement along
Yeah.
with food, water, all that kind of stuff. So when you're going up there we're going from the 7th to the 10th.
Yep.
So it's really like 3 days of pure hunting. So would you still use that first day would you do the boots on the ground like first day of just like scouting pretty much?
Yeah, I mean, like I've gotten to the point now that I would, even if I only had 3 days, I would even be fine committing the first 2 days to walking around if I didn't find something that I liked, and then just kind of going for the gold on the last day of whatever looked like the best. But
Yeah.
um, when I do set that in my mind, because I've done that before. My buddies and I, we go to Wisconsin every now and again, and very similar. Like I don't go out there in the off season really. Maybe one time if I'm lucky, but not really anymore. I'll just get my spots picked out on a map, and my plan is, I'm going daylight to dark, and I'm walking, and I'm trying to hit every single one of these points, and whatever looks the best. If I feel like I can hunt it, I will. If not, I'll just look at that area again on day two.
Yeah.
But like I said, until I get like that feeling of, okay, I can probably see some deer if I hunt in this area, I'm just going to keep on walking and keep on putting boots on the ground, because I don't like setting up on hunts anymore if I just feel like I'm hoping for deer to come by. Like I want there to be a beyond reasonable doubt that I'm going to have that deer be coming in front of me. And if it's not the target buck I'm after, it's at least a deer in the area that's telling me how things are going on and what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because I thought about that. I was like, maybe I should just like the first day, like maybe just scout a bunch, just go through and just hit all these points I have on the map, like that look good, these creek bottoms, these drainages, these saddles, all that kind of stuff, and just like hit them up. Or like OnX has like a thermal thing, like hit those thermals up, hit that up, see if there's doe bedding there, go from there, find the hot scrape, find the hot rubs, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, should I do that? For me, I guess it's the mindset of like getting out, like, okay, you only have 3 days to hunt. Do you really want to quote unquote waste a day of just pure walking around? But like also just now thinking about it, it's like you're not wasting it. You're still able to hunt. Like if you find hot sign, like you could go half the day, find some really hot sign and set up for that second half day, and then have some really good action, and then the next 2 days have really good action too. It's like
Yeah.
Yeah, just passively hunt. First one, just have bow in hand, ready. Maybe not bring your whole setup if you want to main focus on scouting. Just don't bring your whole setup. Just bring the bow.
bow,
That way,
rattle.
That way, if
Yep.
something does come along when you're checking out for sign, you at least have an opportunity at it. And if not, then like, okay, I'm going to come back in here with all of my gear and then set up over here, do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, when you're scouting and you're like, okay, I want to boots on the ground, I want to walk in, look for sign, do all this stuff, and like that's your main focus. Do you try to walk in the same way that you would if you were just strictly hunting it, like you already knew you were going to hunt there, or do you because I see people always saying like, oh, I would if I'm scouting like maybe over the summer or something. You're just walking in. You don't really care about the wind, the thermal, any of that stuff. But like, does that play a role in anything, or does it change as the year progresses?
Yeah, so I mean, like if I'm going in there on like one of these, say like rutcation trips that I was just talking about, I'm just kind of just going for it and seeing what I can find on that scouting, just looking to get as much intel as I possibly can. But when I'm doing off-season stuff, I usually dedicate like a scouting trip if I'm either starting to become more intimate with an area and I've spent a few years there and I understand, okay, like here are the few really good spots that I know I want to set up and hunt more. Then the only thing I really care about in that area is how can I get in and out of there the lowest impact possible. And I will just strictly spend scouting sessions figuring that out, because if you can start checking off, here's the primary food source, here's the bedding areas, here's the travel routes, and I can plan my access so I'm not visually seen from any of those, then that's where I want to walk through the woods at. So it varies depending on when exactly I am scouting, but during the off season, I do like to just spend time um, planning out those access routes.
When do you start? Now this isn't like let's not. This isn't for the rut, but like in your areas, when do you really start like that postseason scouting for yourself? Like, is it like right after the season starts, or like do you let the deer like kind of cool down a little bit, then you go back in?
Yeah, so and that's going to vary if I'm on a private piece or if I'm on public land. You know, on the private land, I'm not as concerned about it of getting out there right away, because it's more important to me to kind of let things cool down
Right.
and just kind of let those deer not get super high stress. But whenever I'm out on public land, you know, like honestly, I'll still go around because we have our season stays open in Ohio until like the first week of February. So,
Jeez.
like we have a muzzleloader in the early middle part of January, and then after that it's late bow. And I mean, the odds of me getting onto a buck late bow season in the hills in Ohio is very low. So I keep that thought in the back of my mind of like, okay, maybe I'll walk around and find something super hot and get set up on something. But
Yeah.
pretty well by that time, it's scouting brains turned on, and that's when work starts to pick up, and I'm traveling around. And these days with the old before I got into this work and I had more time in the off season for scouting, I could kind of plan out trips. But now it's kind of reverse, where if I'm going on a property in one of the areas that I have a nice piece of public I hunt, then I'll plan out that property in the morning, spend the early afternoon with the landowner, and spend the last 3 hours of daylight walking around that public land. So I mean I pretty, and this kind of goes back to like I'm just full throttle. If I have a extra minute to get out there and I'm within earshot of a piece of public I know about, then I'm probably going to stop in there and check it out for a little bit.
Yeah, it's a healthy addiction, right?
Yeah, yeah, it depends on who you ask, I
Well,
guess.
yeah. If you ask our significant others, it's not a healthy addiction, I don't think.
No.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like,
There
hey,
could be worse
can
things
I
though,
take
I
off
guess.
work for this? No. What do you mean no? But it's hunting. No, you can't. You're gonna leave me forever. I was like, oh my god.
So you said the hills of Ohio. Now, what would be like because I never went, neither of us went to Ohio. So like, what are the hills like? Is it kind of like the terrain that I sent you?
It is. I
Okay.
would just say like I feel like what you sent over to me, because so the hills are steep, like
Right.
in these I can tell by looking at the map are steep, but
Mm-hmm.
there's
Yeah.
a lot, it seems like there's a lot more character to the hills
Yeah.
where I hunt, where you just get more terrain features, you know, like when I was drawing lines on some of these areas that you sent me, these ridge systems were like a mile 2 miles long, like
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty intense, and I don't get a lot of that. So I would say that as far as the elevation change and how just the depth of the hills, that's pretty similar, but just have a little bit more character with the areas that I deal with in
Okay.
the southeast part of Ohio there.
Okay.
Here's
That,
Here's something
go
I
ahead.
struggle with. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of not really
Yeah.
e-scouting,
Go
but it's
ahead.
scouting.
Mm-hmm.
So this one area that I've quite literally stumbled upon a couple years ago. When I went through it, there were rubs, scrapes. It was like littered all along this thing, right? And this was first week of November. The main, rut time, right? And I was like, oh, cool, I found this awesome spot. This is great. Set up some camera. Found out they're really, like, coming through overnight there. So that's a whole different, there's a lot of work to be done when it comes to scouting that. But then I went back in the spring. I was like, all right, I'm going to see what it's like here in the spring. Check my camera. There's nothing. Nothing. I'm talking, there's no scrapes. I mean, you tell there's rubs, right? Because they don't just go away. But like the scrapes, they're not touched. Spring, summer, early fall, nothing. So when you find let's say you're in the big woods and you find a scrape on the ground, whether it's June, fall, like how much stock do you put into those without having any history with it in the area? How much stock would you even put into that stuff, not knowing if it's like, okay, they use it for this month and then they never touch it again, or this is just a summer thing? Like I kind of struggle with that.
Yeah, I think that those are all. So I kind of mentioned before, I start with these points of interest, and I'll mark out like the main terrain features, my access points, things like that. And as I'm navigating that route in between all of my points of interest, I'm going to go through and I'm going to mark out things like that if you do find a scrape. And I've looked at a lot of scrapes now to start to understand that there are some scrapes that are just more like that rut time, like a one and done type of thing, where a buck just kind of got fired up. He was in an area, he was tearing up some dirt and headed on to the next ridge looking for some more does. And then there's these other scrapes when you get in the big woods that I look as these big communication hubs. And these are typically the ones, very common for me. I find them underneath beech trees, and you'll see 3 or 4 different branches on the beech tree that are all twisted up. And if the dirt is exposed, sometimes they're big enough that you could lay in it. So if I'm finding a scrape like that, that is like, I'm not telling anybody about where that thing is. And
Yeah.
that's going to be a new point of interest for me to say, okay, I know that there are going to be a lot of different bucks visiting this, because anytime I run cameras on communication scrapes like that, like numerically I get the most bucks. So it's, where are they coming from to get to the scrape, and are there anywhere from here to there that I can capitalize on an opportunity during the rut. So I'll backtrack every cardinal direction until I work my way to a pinch point, and then I keep it in the back of my mind knowing, okay, I might only get nighttime, 90% of the time, nighttime pictures on that communication scrape, but I'm on this pinch point that's 150 yards away, and this is probably where that buck's going to go on his way to that scrape when he hits it in the middle of the night. So scrapes like that, they hold a lot of weight for me when I'm, especially in the big woods.
That's
Yeah,
I need to find one of those.
Yeah,
Yeah, those are fun.
I haven't found one yet.
Because I had one. It was underneath the beech tree, but it wasn't like just one big scrape. It was, I think there was 4 scrapes underneath this one tree, but there wasn't any, like, the thing that confused me was there was no, like, broken licking branches, nothing like that. I'm like, these are clearly scrapes. Hit year after year, like, the leaves are pretty much dead on them, all that kind of stuff. It's like, but there's no broken licking branches. Also, I hung a trail cam there, didn't get any action till like September time frame. Then I had all these big buck come in, and they were hitting their horns right there. Okay, that's not a thing. Yep.
Thank you.
I've been hearing a lot of people say horns on podcasts, and it actually has been irritating me.
And you just said it.
I just said it. So let's stop calling them horns,
because they're not.
they're antlers. Everyone, like, it's antlers. That's it. Okay.
I'll
horns.
I'll
horns are
yes. That way we set the example.
Horns are like a longhorn, a ram, something like that. Where like
they don't fall off.
They don't fall off. Antlers are like fingernails, and they grow and they fall off.
My mom even knows that.
Yep. Well,
and she doesn't hunt. She corrected my dad. My dad said horns the one day. My mom's like, "What?"
It's
goes,
the easy
me?
route. It's the easy route. It's less syllables to say instead of antlers. Horns.
Less word, more talk. What's that?
Oh no, The Office.
Kevin. The Office. Less words.
Save time.
Save time.
Time.
Horn.
Save.
Horn.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So Where were we at? Scrapes. Okay, so
Scrapes, yes.
yeah, I mean, I that's primarily what I run my cameras over, just scrapes. Now today, I will say that I hung it in a spot that I normally probably would not have hung a camera ever.
Ooh.
Like, I didn't find. I was going up to the top of a. So where my parents' camp is, all the mountains run. I think it's east to west. So they all the mountains run there. So there's always valleys between them. Like there's always, and there's flat on top. There's rocks on the side usually, and then when it gets really steep, there's rocks, and then flat on top. So I've been seeing that these deer like to make scrapes on top of the hills. Like that's all the only they don't make it on the benches where it gets flat, and then you can make a bench. Like it's on always on top is where you find the most sign, or in the ravines right there. Like that's the only spot you see them. So I got to the top, and I was like, I see no rubs. I see like there's trails up on top here, but there's like they're not beaten down during the wintertime, so they're not up here during wintertime, obviously. And so I'm following this faint trail out. I see a little scrape underneath the pine tree, licking branch completely broken off. I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep going out. So I'm getting close to the point. I get to the point, and then I see like where a scrape should be in my mind. I'm looking, I'm like, a scrape should be here, 100%. But then I see a very faint trail, and it like splits off into a V, and two trails go down to the point right there. And on one side, if you pull up on X, there's thermals right there, and then the other side it's like white oaks. So I'm like, okay. And I hung a camera there where the V comes and splits to one trail. I was like, I'm hanging a camera here. Like I know, usually I hang over scrapes or like really good sign. There's not really good sign right here. There's hardly any rubs. There's a really old rub, like a really old signpost rub that hasn't been hit in a while. And I'm like, my guts tell me to hang this there. So I hung it there, and I just made a quick scrape with my X2 stick. I put it in the dirt, and I just scraped it up, and then I hit it's a pine tree, and I just hit the pine tree a few times, got some of that going down, didn't put any scent in it, and I got out of there. Hung the cell cam with my solar panel and got out.
Yeah.
So that's the first time I hung something that was like there was no good sign there, just that very faint trail. And I'm like, the reason I did it was because, one, I know there's two really big buck in that area, and I got him last August on like the other mountain, and it's like it connects right there. So I'm like, maybe it's them, but like also, I feel like doe leave more of a really defined trail than a buck would. Like you have to really look to see this buck trail, And I think he could be bedding with either wind, and that's why it V's off.
Yeah, it really does seem to me like that. That's what my inclination would be too if I came across that in the woods. Is like I feel like I'm probably out on a buck bedding point here. To tie that into like the e-scouting, another element I like to do after the fact, after I find something like that, is look at the detail of that area, and once you get that picture that tells you, okay, this is likely a buck bed, and now you can kind of confirm that. Now you can take that and find out where else is he bedded based off of that map, because that's the one thing that I've found is that if you can pick out a feature or any kind of combination of features that have a buck bed, typically you can go in that same mountain range or hill system, whatever it may be, and there's going to be more buck beds there. Same for doe bedding, same for the flats that they eat, the acorns underneath, and travel routes. Like you can always e-scout after you walk around an area, and there's so many different tactics that I use for that. Like I just said about identifying beds. Another one I like to do, I call them rut zones, where I'll go out and mark a bunch of fresh sign on these rut trips, and I'm going to look for like the elevation range where there's a high density of sign, and say it's between 1,200 feet and 1,300 feet in elevation. There's just a hotbed of sign. Well, I know that I'm probably only going to look at 12 to 1,300 feet when I go out from here on out, because that's where the most sign was. So it's like you can always e-scout after you go back out, and there's a lot of different ways you can use it to your advantage, and that's one of the best ways that I've been able to continue to find buck bedding in the hill country, is finding something like you just did, taking it back and looking at the map and say, okay, what else looks just like this?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think, because there was one spot I had marked. I was like, this point I have to check out. Like it's flatter, it's not as steep, but yet below it is extremely steep. So like they're not going to want to go down that steepness. And I know from this little bit of time up in this area is like when it's really steep like that, it's very rocky. Like it's all rocks.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a rock bed, and they're gonna and that I don't know from experience because I haven't hunted this area too much, but like I feel like rocks kind of would mess with the thermals as well. It would keep the ground a little cooler than what it actually would be. Like I feel like it would stop kind of the. It would just be a barrier, like a pinch point, a natural pinch
Mm-hmm.
point that would just deter them from going there because they break a leg if they go through the rock
Yeah.
bed. It's like, yeah. So it's just one more thing to use in your favor with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And like I look at kind of stuff like that as like almost like call it like a back wall where
Mm-hmm.
if that buck had to escape over that rock area for his life, then he knows that he can do it. But is he going to do it on just a daily basis? No.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, like I feel like that's part of their survival thing is they like to be close to that because that also means they know that nothing's coming up behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything does come up behind them, they're going to hear them, they're going to see them, and they're gone before that whatever it is that's coming after them gets through that back wall type feature.
Yeah, and like I don't know, you guys like when I get in a certain area and I'm just like looking around, I'm like, this feels bucky. Like this just I'm like looking around right now. I'm like, there's gotta be some good sign here. Like when you find no signs, it's kind of deterring. Like it hurts a little bit. It's like man, like I could have swore there'd be good sign right here. Like
Yeah.
there's and you find like you see old rubs, you see little trails, but then I think the thing that kept me positive in that situation was like I was seeing huge deer shit, like really big, like big marble size.
Yeah.
I was like, it's either a big doe, which if there's a big doe, that means during the rut there's going to be a good sized buck here early, or it's a big buck, like one of the two. Like it's no bear.
I think that's one thing. Like I almost get disappointed when I don't find deer poop at all.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll walk through. Like I had a few spots last year that I walked through, and I was like, there should be deer here.
Mm-hmm.
Just here. Like I'm not expecting a herd, but there should be deer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not even finding poop, no rubs, no nothing. I was like, well, this is disappointing. Like, well, on to the next spot, I guess.
So, for you, Greg, which is there a certain sign like after you put those waypoints down, you go to those waypoints, and like say you have the situation I just had where it's like you find very minimal sign. Are you still like what kind of sign would you want to see? Like you see that minimal sign, like would you want to see kind of what I saw where it's like the very faint trails and it's like no real buck sign or no sign period? It's like
Yeah. Though, like if I saw those faint trails,
Yeah.
and it's like an off-season setting, that's typically enough for me to want to go out to that point and start checking it out just to get that confirmation that there is that buck bed out there. And then once I have that, then it's just like that's enough to now go back and figure out just all of the details of when is that buck going to be using that bedding area.
Yeah.
So, based off of what types of winds would he have the advantage in that bed, times of year based off of the surrounding food, all of those different elements. And then from there, I'm just really looking for where can I go to set up on this buck, and is it going to be like an early season thing where I try to sneak in and get him when he's right coming out, or is it going to be something that just knowing, okay, if I get up here and I know this is a southerly wind bed, if I just get up here on a good day in the end of October, early November, and get somewhere near this point, I have a pretty good inclination that he's going to be bedded out there. So once I have pretty much everything you have, like that's typically enough for me to check that off as like, okay, I can pretty much confirm that there is going to be a buck here at least sometimes.
I think the one thing I have to do is follow that trail, that faint trail that I was following that led me to those V's, or that Y, I should say, led me to that Y, is follow it the other way. like follow
Mm-hmm.
away from that point to see what's going on there. Because like this trail that I was following that led up to that was on the ridge. So like it was on the very edge, and like after that ridge, it kind of like dropped off, and it was like very thick down in there, like rocky, all that kind of stuff. So like they're walking that ridge right there, and they're in pines. So like they have everything they would need, and also from talking to the locals up there, there's not much archery pressure. So
Mm-hmm.
like
Music to your ears.
music to my ears when I heard that. I was like, okay, well now I gotta, because if he's betting on that point and I'm set up on top, the evening would be perfect to hunt that in my mind. And if the
Yeah.
wind's right, like the thermals on top of a mountain with thermals or wind, I feel like the wind would mess you up more, right? If the thermals were wrong or the wind was
Yeah,
wrong.
and I think that that's where just like I'm trying to pick apart that spot of, okay, I know that, say, like, let's just use southwest wind as an example. Like, okay, I know that on a southwest wind it makes a lot of sense for him to bed here.
Mm-hmm.
Where can I go if it is a southwest wind, knowing I'm going to come out here and try to hunt in the evening with that downward thermal pull, and
Mm-hmm.
try to find a spot that's going to put as much in my advantage as possible, where there's a least amount likelihood that he's going to know that I'm here, and then set up accordingly. So just trying to remove any variable possible that puts the advantage back in his favor and keeping it in mind.
Man, I don't know about you, Ethan, but I'm getting excited now. It's like it's end of June right now, and I'm already thinking. I'm like running through my head right now. I'm picturing myself in the saddle, and like this big just tank of a buck just walks by, and I saw this video the other day of oh, what was it? It was, I think his name on YouTube is KEO, I believe, and he hunts a lease property in PA, and he had this buck, and dude, like it. Oh my god, he nailed him, and the buck went, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want a buck that does that.
Yeah.
Like he nailed him right in the heart, and just the growl, the buck growl that came out of him. I was like,
Yeah.
and like
Got
he
you
was
pumped up.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was just pumped up, and then like just
Yeah.
me now just thinking about what's possibly in that area, because I know there's some
Yeah.
really big buck in the area.
Yeah.
And it's like just thinking about it, and then like having a possibility of a huge buck growl. It's like, man, like I wouldn't even care like if it was on film. I just want like right now. I'm gonna try and paint a picture for everyone that's listening right now. It's the leaves are turning colors. It's October. The wind. It's a brisk like 42 degrees. The wind's perfect. It's an evening. The sun's about to set. All of a sudden, I'm getting chills right now. All of a sudden, you look to your right. There, you hear something. You think it's a squirrel because you saw squirrels all day.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, just crunch, crunch, and then you hear, some leaves moving around, and you hear a grunt, and then you look over, a big buck's coming through. You smack him, and he goes, and he goes down 10 yards from you, and you're just like, oh my god, I just have chills right now. Oh gosh, isn't that like that's a dream? That's a
No.
dream.
Well,
October dreams.
Tell you what, I'm going to the cabin next weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I'm doing when I get up there.
Buck growls or what?
I'm going.
Oh,
I'll just walk. Yeah, we're gonna walk through the woods. It's just growling. No, I'm going up top,
okay.
and I still have a camera up there from rifle season. I have to
Mm.
pull, so who knows what's on that at
Yeah.
this point, or
Yeah.
if the batteries are dead
Mm-hmm.
or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm pulling that camera. Well, I'll leave the camera where it is,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just walking.
Yep.
I want to go scout now.
Yeah, I think, Greg, since you said you drew on that map,
Yes.
do you want to share your screen instead, and then we'll go from there?
So I can share. I didn't save any of those drawings,
Okay.
just so you do know, but I can definitely share my screen.
Yeah.
I'd be more than happy to do that.
Yeah. So then that way you can kind of maybe Ethan will get some pointers from it of where he should
Yeah.
go.
Because that's
Now,
I'll be.
now before I pull this up, is there a certain zoom out or zoom in that you want me to pull it up on?
Do you mean like with no names or anything like that, or
Yeah, yeah.
Minimal as possible.
as minimal as possible?
Okay. See what I
I
can
mean,
do here.
because this will be released in a couple. It'll be a little bit, so like I can edit the video down and try and like, um, um, grain out
Blank out the
blank
name,
out
Yeah.
any
the names and stuff
names.
like that. So there's plenty of time to edit the video, so I can do that. But like,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, let's just roll with it. I'll just edit out the
We'll figure
videos.
it out.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll just
that
put.
sounds good. I'll open up the area that I was looking at the most. There's one ridge system that was sticking out to me that I
Okay.
really enjoyed looking at.
I
Okay.
wonder if it's one that we were
So,
looking at too. I'd love to know.
okay. Can you guys see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So I really liked this ridge system because usually where I start, especially in a spot like this, where you just have an endless amount of opportunity to go out and find a good spot. Like I always like to tell people to start out by just figuring out what types of areas do you like to hunt,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of like stick to that. And that in itself is probably going to remove at least 50% of this map.
Yeah.
And for myself, I like to hunt ridge systems that have as much character as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So this one that we have right in here seems to have a lot of that,
Yeah.
just because when it flows all the way down out to the point, and if you work back all the way up through it, you have a lot of different hilltops. We have drainages all over the place, and you just have a lot of opportunity to kind of get out in there and really start breaking it down and seeing what it has to offer.
Yeah.
So once I have a ridge system like this picked out, we go into that figuring out exactly where do we want to break down this, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where I'm starting with my points of interest. So that's where I'm looking at things like our saddles that are
Mm-hmm.
sticking out, and then I'll come through and I'll also drop waypoints on drainage chops that are sticking out, and going through this whole section and doing that, and then creating some sort of a route system where how can I walk through and hit all of these points of interest when I do put those boots on the ground, and start to mark out those different individual things like that potential buck bed that you found,
Mm-hmm.
or did I find one of these big communication scrapes, or did this drainage top just have a beat down runway? And it's then they're all individual pieces of the puzzle I can put on once I get my boots on the ground.
Okay. Now, so for Ethan's point where he has all those buck coming late at night. Now they're at a point, and I found that it went to a drainage, which that
Mhm.
drainage then connects to another drainage, and then it's like goes to a saddle, goes to another drainage. Like, in your experience with, I don't know if you have experience with it, but like when you run those cameras in those areas and you get that kind of intel, do you see like maybe that buck is taking the easiest route so he can catch all that scent down in the rut? Like it's like he's going that way. Like you just have to pretty much run cameras on every single drainage until you figure out when he's going to be daylighting.
Yeah, so if I have like data like that where I have um, camera information.
Right.
I like to go in and use the slope angle feature.
Okay. Yep.
And I like to turn that on, and I like to look for like those little intricacies of where are the easiest paths of travel
Mm-hmm.
to see if I can't like narrow down any pinch points. So as I look back into the system, there's a lot of red here, so it's
Yeah.
very steep. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, where can I find the areas that provide straight lines in between those red steep areas? So like this little area right here is something that sticks out to me as like one of those drainage crossings
Mm-hmm.
because it's red, but it's yellow in between. So we know that we're going to have a flat spot here. So like I'll go through and I'll continue to mark those out. So if this is the point, I'm getting the nighttime pictures down here, and then I can just kind of work my way back. I have a pretty good idea, like here's going to be a pinch point. I can work my way back down the other side. And although it's not as obvious of a pinch point, like there's some green in here. So I know that this will be worth me walking around because they're probably only going to have one path of travel once it gets down into here. So where can I kind of level that out? So I like to use all of these different layers and features that they have on Onyx that
Mm-hmm.
allow me to draw those straight lines that you reference, and then kind of correlate those to my waypoints or my trail camera locations.
Yeah. I definitely like the yeah the
The slope
Yeah,
angle
I
here.
just completely freaking drew a blank. I apologize. The slope angle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then like for me, like what do you like? The slope angle I really like. Do you run it mostly in this, or do you run the hybrid more?
I flip back and forth. It
Okay.
depends exactly what I'm looking for. Like when I'm just trying to identify the points like the saddles and the drainage tops,
Yeah.
especially with this latest update, like they really
Yeah.
stick out super clean on this with the new topo lines.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like to flip back to that hybrid mode once I have those. So then you can start to look for the things like our vegetation breaks here.
Mm-hmm.
You can turn on the other filters, like if they did do any kind of cutting or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that, and you can mark those out because in accumulation to the easier terrain flow, the edges of things like this, where it looks like there's a pine thicket, like that's another habitat edge that's going to be very important to me as I'm kind of rolling through that property. So I like to use that hybrid mode just as much as I do that just regular topo layer as well.
Yeah, I the new update with OnX, like I found myself zooming out more to see the
Yeah,
terrain better. Like it was like, man, like this you can see like the actual fingers, you can show the
it's
crow's
awesome.
feet, all that kind of stuff. It's like, man, this is especially up in this area right here.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
like really really defined.
Yeah, they
So,
did a really good job with updating
oh
those
yeah.
contour lines on this one. It got me really excited the first time I seen it. And then I also like too, I know you can do it on the desktop,
Oh
like when you
yeah.
can pivot and
Yep.
you can and kind of look at it, because especially in like these steeper terrains like we're dealing with here, it really makes it obvious. Like, okay, here's an area that I know is going to be a flat spot where like
Mm-hmm.
this, there's probably not a lot of up and down activity. So this is another like really good example of knowing anything that wants to cross is probably going to do so somewhere like right there. And
Mm-hmm.
then I also have these habitat edges and then a couple saddles around too. So I have a whole bunch of combining activity here. So there's no way I wouldn't scout this area and not check out that little zone to see exactly what I have going on.
So let's focus on that area right there, because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a really good example for a lot of
Hmm.
people right there.
Yeah.
With the two habitat edges, you have the drainage right there. You have the saddles, multiple saddles coming together. You have one. You have like three, four saddles kind of coming together right there.
Yep.
So it's like, how would you break that area down? Like I know, boots on the ground, like that's a huge part, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's like the like you can e-scout all you want, but you got to put boots on the ground to actually know what's going on there.
Yep.
So where would you like? Would you only have a certain amount of time in a day? Like some of us,
Hmm.
with family,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff, and with how long it's going to take you to get back to this area, how are you going to break it down? Like
Yeah.
let's
the
go
ac-
through that process.
And the
Yeah.
access, like how would you
Yeah.
access,
Yeah.
say it is
Access,
during
yeah.
that rut vacation time? How would you access it to scout it and then to hunt it?
Yep. So for the scouting purposes, really good example, like you said, busy life,
Mm-hmm.
time at a limited amount. I'm just trying to get back there as easy as I possibly can. So I'm going to try to identify where that closest access point is. If I have any other POIs that I want to hit along the way, I'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
As far as breaking down this individual area, like let's just put ourselves in a scenario where I have a pretty good idea that I only have a couple days to hunt. I know that this ridge system is probably going to be where I want to place my focus on. I'm going to look for starters right around this drainage chop just
Mm-hmm.
because I have a pretty good reason to believe that there's going to be some sort of crossing between this line and this line here. So somewhere in that 200-yard stretch, I'm expecting there to be some kind of east to west movement. And then the other places I can draw lines as well are along these habitat edges because those are going to be natural flows of deer travel, just because that the deer like to follow those habitat edges. So if those line up with terrain features, and then you can kind of get that same 200-yard stretch in here, I know that they may want to get from here to here, and they have a really quick shot to do that right in the middle here. So I'm going to start by breaking down this area. And if that's something that I feel comfortable, because like this is something that I would like to set up on,
Mm-hmm.
hypothetically, that I would access right up the heart of this drainage, get right in underneath elevation side of wherever that crossing is, and that's going to be a prime location that I would really like to hunt. And then outside of that, I'm just trying to identify any other types of opportunity that I have, whether that be maybe a little bit down lower here where the habitat edge continues. Maybe I only have to go up to this and I can go straight up and catch them cruising underneath of here. Or very similar to this habitat edge on this side, maybe I can walk up this drainage, get right underneath of this and hunt below that. So I'm going to focus around like this whole section, but starting with like what's my from like just my style, what I like to hunt, what I've had the experience with the most deer sign. I'm going to start here and kind of filter off from that to get those backup plans, because you're hunting public land, maybe you roll up in here and somebody else is in there, and it's like, well, I know I'm not sitting there today, and I got to go find somewhere else.
Yeah, and the thing is, like with this area you just pointed out, like it looks on the map, it looks like a small area, but you get in there, you probably just that little square right there, you could be in there for like 2-3 hours just trying to break that
Yeah.
area down.
Yeah, and that's what I noticed when I was like way zoomed out and I looked at the whole length of this ridge, and it was over 2 miles, and it's just, that's a big
Yeah.
ridge system here. So
Yeah.
even just this section in itself, that's a good sized property for some
Mm-hmm.
people. So that's the thing you got to take into consideration of how far are these deer going to be moving,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing like I have to put myself in the highest odds
Yeah.
spot possible. And even though I hunt a spot, there's sign there, and I just don't see any activity. If we're talking about big woods like this, sometimes there's just not deer that day because the
Mm-hmm.
density is so much lower because they're so much more spread out.
Yeah, that's what we
Yeah.
see a lot is like it's so spread out. It's like if you see a doe one day, it's like, man, that was a good day. But then like my
Yep.
dad has encounters where he sees like 6-7 buck in one day chasing after one doe. It's like if you're in the right spot, you're just in the right
Oh
spot.
yeah. Yeah, I get that on my trail camera all of the time. Like it happened to me on one of my cameras last year where I had a doe come through at it was like 11 o'clock in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and then pretty much every half an hour the rest of the day there was a new buck that was following her right on that trail, going the same direction, same
Oh my
path. There's
gosh.
a half an hour on every single half hour, boom, 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 just all these different bucks, and that's how tight it can be, especially out in the hills. It's
Yeah.
like, and that's why I just if I find a pinch point and the sign is there and I have good access, it's just I'll hunt it a day in and day out, because almost to me, if I go up and I was say hunting the top of this
Mm-hmm.
drainage and I didn't see anything on the first day, then it's like, okay, well, I know day two I'm probably going to see something. So
Okay.
I know that kind of contradicts like what I said about finding the hot sign, and
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not, but when I'm looking at that timeline, if I do narrow down on this being the spot, I don't want to second guess myself and try to find the spot again.
Right.
So I will spend the time once I'm there trying to figure it out. And if I need to make that adjustment, I'll make that micro adjustment and flip over to the other side of the ridge. Because like when I hunt with my buddies and we try to tear apart a ridge system together, I might set up on something like this. My buddy will set up down here, and he could go and he could see 8 to 10 deer, and I don't see a single one.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, well, why did that happen? And then we try to reverse engineer, figure that out, and then we can kind of narrow in a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
So you can be close and not see a lick
Yeah.
out in the woods.
So for that spot right there, now there's kind of like there's a pinch point that's obvious right there, and there's
Hmm.
there's a second pinch point there with the drainage.
Yep.
So was that like an all day sit type area, or would that be a morning or evening type
Yeah,
sit?
so I can tell you what I typically like to do anytime I'm hunting the tops of these drainages. I know that I mentioned it before, but the thermals will start to pull down these drainages
Mm-hmm.
a heck of a lot sooner than other parts of the ridge system. So with this being a south-facing drainage, it's a little bit different because there's going to be sun exposure. But with how steep it is, this hillside right here is probably going to capture a lot of that sun as it's setting.
Mm-hmm.
So once that sun gets low enough that this hilltop is blocking this drainage, that thermal is going to start pulling down there. And I've seen that happen as early as like 11:30 in the morning, and that's the time that I'm going to go up here and I'm going to and sit then the rest of the day.
Okay.
Um, once I feel comfortable that those thermals switch down those drainages, which you add in the element of if there's running water, it could
Mm-hmm.
have a downward thermal pull all day long.
Okay.
So, and whenever I feel confident that my thermals aren't going to rise into where that pinch point is, that's when I'm going to go in there and hunt.
Okay. Now, below that, where the drainage comes down right there, that creek
Mm-hmm.
bottom right there,
Mm-hmm.
from my experience, from my scouting in this type of terrain, I've seen a lot of really good sign at the very base, at the very front of this mountain right here, where you
Yep.
have
Like
like,
you're talking about down in
yep,
here.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then like I've seen buck, they bed on those. If you turn the slope angle on again, where like you
Mm-hmm.
have the there's a yellow line that usually runs down the two sides of the mountain, where it then they can come down very easily without having to go through, or it's
Yep.
orange sometimes, but like
Mm-hmm.
right there is like their easiest path to the
Yes.
bottom. So
Yep.
is that something that you would look at too? Because like me, in my mind for this deer camp that we're going to do, my mind was first like, okay, I could hunt the creek bottoms pretty much all day, like sit there all day, because the thermals would be pulling down to that creek all day, unless
Mm-hmm.
you don't below a trail, beaver dam, whatever. But is that something you look at as well? Like if
It,
you were doing
it's
that?
so then this kind of ties into hunt what you like.
Mm-hmm.
And myself personally, I've gotten busted enough times for a lifetime in bottoms that I just don't even mess with them anymore.
Okay.
And I'm not saying they don't work because
Yeah.
I have guys that I hunt with that they run with them and they love them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying I don't see bucks down there because I do, but man, I don't know what it is, but me and bottoms, we just have a bad relationship. So I've just decided to step away from it and swallow my pride and climb up to the top of the ridge and
I
kind of work with it up there. So I think that if you can craft a system for an approach to hunt those bottoms, and it sounds like it's very probable based off
mm-hmm.
what you said with just like what you've identified there, you've identified something that deer are probably going to do. So if you have that and you feel like you can run with it, then I would just go for it if
Yeah.
that's what you're the most confident in.
Well, I haven't set up yet in a bottom, so I don't know. I could
Yeah.
be busted right away. Um,
Yeah.
but it's like it's one of those areas that I've always seen hot sign in this area, like multiple scrapes, multiple big rubs, and then like zooming out on all next, you see like why it could be, because you have all these drainages coming down. You have the crests of mountains or hills coming down to this area where they could bed. They come off the top easily. And I was like, man, this would be like a perfect spot to like rattle in, like really rattle and like get them, fired up a little bit, because it'd be like
Yep.
it echo like crazy up in there. They hear everything. But yet again, also to your point, it's like I could be busted real quick
Yeah.
with that.
Yep, definitely. And I just that and that's what I try to look at, especially if I'm doing a rut style hunt that I only have a few times. That's where I'm falling back into what is it that I can do to eliminate as
Hmm.
many uncontrollable variables so that way the odds are more in my favor, because the
Yeah.
more I can have the odds in my favor, the greater likelihood I'm going to fill that tag, which is already a really hard thing to do when you're talking about only being able to hunt for a few days in an
Yep.
area. So that's why I tend to lean into those drainage tops or the habitat edges, anywhere I can find those combining features. Which, like the spot I was looking at up top,
Hmm.
that's a really hotbed of a place where I would definitely want to spend some time.
Could you? Now that one wasn't an obvious one where it's like
hmm
you had these two edges. Now would they be hard or soft edges? Because I've always been confused about that for those
So
two.
like I'm gonna shut this
Yeah.
slope layer
Yep.
off real quick so it's a little bit easier to see that. Oh dang it, clicked on the wrong one. Um, I would call these hard edges just because you're looking at the difference between like a pine thicket and then it turns into the hardwoods. I would imagine this is like a satellite image from later in the year when all
Yeah.
that foliage is off the
Hmm.
trees. So I look at this as a hard edge just because it's a two very different habitat types. Just like if you're going from an ag field to a timber line, like
Okay.
those are two
Hmm.
completely different things.
Okay.
Uh, Yeah, yep. But
Is
those soft edges, I found that those are more difficult to find on the
mhm,
map and easier to find boots on the ground.
right.
Uh, Not saying they're not worthy, because those soft edges can be really, really good locations
Hmm.
for especially older buck travel. Just I think it falls into one of those things like we said, like we can look at this map and it's pretty clear. Okay, there's a habitat edge here. There's pinch points and everything like
Hmm.
that. So there could be somebody else that goes to check that out. But
Yep.
if you find the soft edge and then you go back and you look and now you're doing that post session e-scouting and you're like, man, this doesn't show up on the map. It doesn't look like a pinch point. The slope angle doesn't throw anything off. This is the kind of spot that I probably want to really focus on.
Okay. Now, is there an area around here that wouldn't be as an obvious of spot that you found? Because that one obviously is a really good spot, and
Hmm.
um, that spot I might actually go check out.
I know that one
Yeah.
seems like a good spot to go check
Um,
out.
that's difficult because like for me when I'm out there and I'm e-scouting, I
Hmm.
am typically just trying to mark out the obvious spots and then
Right.
find what like I like to just call them micro features.
Okay.
I try to find those micro features when I'm going from point to point to point, and
Hmm.
maybe something sticks out where I'm looking and like, okay, there's a super condensed flow of deer movement right here, but then I look at the map and there's nothing that's really throwing that off. So
Yeah.
it could happen anywhere in that line of travel between your points. Like, for example, where I get those a lot in Ohio is I'll kind of zoom in here to give you a look at it. So this is just a pretty typical downward slope,
Hmm.
but there's something like this just tiny little hump right here.
Okay.
Well, sometimes in Ohio, there everything is so steep that will become a washout because they do a lot of logging in the state forest land and stuff.
Hmm.
So with the erosion, it washes the ground right out. So this doesn't look like anything on the map, but from here down all the way to the drainage bottom, it's just a mudslide. But right at the top of that, there's a massive beat down runway, and those can be some of the prime locations to hunt, especially when you start compounding them on all these other pinch points that we're looking at.
And that the only way you're going to see that is if you go out there boots on the ground with that kind of stuff. Like you can
Hmm.
mark that, be
Yeah,
like, okay, that's a little, little curvature in the topo line. Want to go check
right.
that because I actually did that with the area I found the Y at. There
Hmm.
was I turned on the slope angle and there was all red, and then there was a little circle of yellow, and then it went red again. I was like, maybe I should check this area out that's like a little bit yellow right here. It kind of got flat. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, you wouldn't see that just with a topo line. So like you would see
Yeah.
it with the slope angle. But another thing here is that I would, in my mind, that would stick out, like where that one waypoint is, right above the drainage, right here,
Hmm.
that red one.
Yep.
There's a looks like a oil. I think that's a pipeline right there. The
Yeah.
pipeline.
Hmm.
That would be another area for me that would stick out. Like get on top of that drainage because that's an easy way of travel for a buck to
Yep.
just cruise
Exactly.
and check that out. Like, but then again, that's one of those really obvious ones that someone might be like, okay, I'm going to get there. Like that's an easy
Yep.
path of travel for them to get in there. But
Hmm.
yet it could be a good, it doesn't matter if someone's there or not. Like a buck is still during this time frame that we're talking about, a buck is just going to do stupid stuff. Like he's not going to think right. He's not going to worry about what he smells. He's not going to worry about what he sees most of the time. Most of
Yeah.
the time. But I mean, he's going to be traveling the easiest way to get to where he wants to go to, he's only thinking with one head at that moment in time. So he's
Yeah.
not,
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
not,
Not the right one.
yeah, exactly. Well, we,
Yeah.
we, we think it's the right one at that
Yeah,
time frame.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
He knows what
Yeah,
he's
and
doing.
that's just where it's like you take all that into consideration. You look at the other hunters and
Hmm.
everything like that. And if there is going to be another hunter there, to then instead of just looking at that as a negative, try to find a way to turn that into a
Hmm.
positive and just be like, okay, I know I can now check this spot off the list because I'm just going to assume that that spot is now overpressured and he's going to react. And maybe instead of crossing over this pipeline, he's just going to try to come down here a little bit more towards the bottom, then hook around here. So,
Yeah.
and then, it's like maybe he's doing that. So now you get this downward pull, and now he crosses here. He knows there's a guy in the power line, so he's not going to loop up there. But then you just kind of backdoor that, and then you get in there. Not saying go and climbing a tree 100 yards behind somebody that you see out on a piece of public land, but
Yeah.
just if you like find that setup or something when you're scouting, just assume that there's a larger amount of human activity up
Yeah.
in that area.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like that the drainage, the two drainages right there above that to the
Mm-hmm.
right, to my right there. They're kind of close together. Like that to me, I don't know about you, but that like sticks out where it has like kind of three drainages going down very close
Yeah.
together right there,
Mm-hmm.
where it kind of
Yep.
looks a little more green, like there's a mix of pine in there as well.
Yep.
But that to me is like that would be a good either would you for that there you'd want to be on top as well.
So this one is almost like what I just call them like thermal hubs.
Yeah.
Anytime there's two or more of these drainages that are dumping down into one area,
Uh-huh.
I'm looking, and honestly, like probably right around here
Mhm.
in this zone, I would I would put money on there being some kind of one of those communication scrapes, just because those bucks can enter into this and get all of that scent data that's coming down from up here, and then the rest of the tops as well. But it's going to dump right down in this area, and that's a hot spot where I like to usually find those communication scrapes. So whether or not I might not even go in here and look at this system as being something that I would feel comfortable setting up on,
Mhm.
but maybe this is just the place that I run my trail camera for inventory,
Yep.
because it's really not that far away from these other opportunities like this saddle or that drainage top or these habitat edges or whatever we get down here. So um, anytime you get a feature that sticks out, it doesn't always have to be a setup, but you can still use it to your advantage one way or another.
Yeah.
I found one of my, if not my favorite place to hunt on public land here in Ohio by running a camera on a communication scrape down in one of these thermal hubs. And the first year I ran it on it, I lost count, but I think it was like, I want to say, I know it was over 20 different bucks that I got on this camera
Jeez.
throughout the course of the season.
Wow.
Like a ridiculous amount where if you don't see the pictures, like you would not believe it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But like after that, I was like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But I realized, okay, I'm not going to be able to get into this hub, but there are these beautiful pinch points and these bedding knobs and all of this different stuff in every direction around here. So I know that like this is my starting point.
Mhm.
I'm going to go out from here and find out where are these bucks coming from and going to once they leave here.
Yeah, and you can. I mean, well, when I see that, because I thought the same exact thing looking at that, because I don't think I'm trying to figure out where exactly we are, but we'll worry about that after we're
Yeah,
done.
dude, I've been trying to
recording.
think.
Yeah.
I can see the names. I can see certain names. So I'm like, okay, I think I know where this
But
is.
the communication hub, that's what I look for. It's like that'd be a great intel spot, like you said, like to run a camera over that, let it soak all year. But then like if you see buck in there after buck after buck after buck, like you're saying, like there has to be some really good doe bedding near there if there's that many buck around there. Like, and then my mind after getting that intel would be like, okay, those pine thickets right there, that's where some good doe bedding, or there's like
Yeah.
where there's some good laurel up in the area or
Mm-hmm.
something like
Yep.
that. Like that's where I got to go. And like
Yeah.
then that connects the dot back to that top of the drainage, like you just said, of where you would set up and sit there for 2 days straight. Like if you didn't see one day, you go
Hmm.
back there again because like something's going to be there. And that
Yeah,
right there,
absolutely.
it
And
just
that's the beauty of e-scouting, man.
yeah, yeah. I freaking love it. Like my mind is going nonstop right now of like what to look for and what not to go to. Like, and these mountains are just the mountains up there are unforgiving, really. Like it's
Yeah.
like you get up
Yeah.
in there, it's like if you don't have a compass or your phone isn't charged fully, or you don't have a power bank with you to charge your phone, it's like you're gonna get turned around real quick.
Oh yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
that's just like it is where I'm at down in
Mm-hmm.
southern Ohio there, man. It's like you don't get cell phone service, the
Mm-hmm.
terrain's really rough, you're wearing out, you're burning a lot of calories,
Mm-hmm.
and but man, it's a really special place when you're out there, and like if you can commit yourself to learning, you just it's a great time, and
Mm-hmm.
the value and the reward at the end is there are some really special deer that hang
Oh
out in
yeah.
habitat like this.
Yeah, I haven't seen any on the hoof. Like I've never seen them in. Well, the one it wasn't a like one of the big ones I had on camera, but I would have shot it. Like it was like a mountain
Hmm.
buck where would have got by myself, would have got out of the woods by myself. It would have been that experience that everyone wants. But like the buck up there, just phenomenal. Like
Yep.
it's just,
Yeah.
I mean, Ethan, the one you showed me, the other one was okay, but
Yeah.
the second one you showed me, it
Oh,
was
that
like,
one was like, oh, hello.
and I still think you're hiding some from me because you only showed me two, and I still think there's more that you're not showing me, but it's okay.
There has to be more there
I
because
forgive you.
the amount of sign, I was like, there's no way 2 buck
Yeah,
did all that.
yeah,
There's no way.
Yeah.
There's too much.
yeah. I
I was like,
mean,
there's got to be a couple up
even
there.
the encounter you had last year with that really big, the Coke base one,
Yeah,
it's
right.
like
Yeah.
they're up there. It's just so much terrain to try and figure them out. But I think the main thing people have to focus on, and this isn't just for hunting the rut or setting up or e-scouting for the rut, is like go find those hub systems, run a camera in there, see what's in there, and play the long game. Like it's
Yep.
you got to play that long game and then see where they are after that.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think one thing I learned this in building business, but you can really translate this saying over into hunting is if you don't understand something, continuously break it down into smaller chunks until you
Mm-hmm.
do. So if any part of this conversation is going over your head because it's like thermal hub, drainage top, this, that, everything else, and it's just like all these different terms,
Mm-hmm.
take a term and spend some time learning what that term is.
Mm-hmm.
That's back to the content. Like there's content on all of this stuff and some
Mm-hmm.
really smart guys that are talking about it. So break that down into the small chunks and understand what a thermal hub is, understand why deer like those drainage tops, understand what a habitat edge is, and then go into the field.
Yeah.
E-scouting doesn't just have to be putting waypoints on a map, drawing habitat edges, and doing things. It can also be understanding terminology and trying to break things down to its core. So that way, when you do go out into the woods, your woodsman skills are sharp and like you're on your game out there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I 100% agree because that's how I've learned. Like it was like, people talk about it and it's like, okay, I got to figure out what this is. I got to connect the dots here of what this actually means. Like saddles, it was like I kind of understood what it was, but then like once I started seeing them more and more, I was like, yeah, that's what it is.
Yep.
100% that's what it is.
Yeah.
Thermal hubs were the same way. It was like once I heard people talk about it and then I saw a few videos on it, it was like, all right, I got to look at these more because this is pretty
Hmm.
interesting, you know?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And then no different than like that area that you found
mm-hmm,
when you were talking about the Y split, everything like that. As you started telling that story, my mind immediately was like, he found a buck bed. Like
mm-hmm,
that's what that is. And I've found enough of those now that I can go out in the woods and kind of like uh, assume, okay, this is what I'm walking into because I've
mm-hmm.
seen it more and more. But there was a time that I was clueless what I was doing in the woods. Like walking through places I had no business walking through. Didn't know I was walking past probably the best stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything, but like that's the beauty in it too.
Mm-hmm,
And it's cool to think of. Okay, Greg 5, 6 years ago to Greg now is a completely different hunter. If
mm-hmm.
I continue on this growth journey, what am I going to look like in another 5 to 6 years? It's just that's a beautiful thing, and that gets back into just really enjoying the
Mm-hmm.
process of it.
Yeah, it's a really cool process and it's a lot of knowledge. I think this was a lot of knowledge. But before we end the podcast, you said about conserve calories. You burn a lot of calories. You dehydrate all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When you're scouting, when you're hunting in general too, what are some snacks you take in the woods to like keep the calories up? And then how do you do you take something in the woods like when you have these creeks that you're coming around? Like do you take something in to like pull water from that as well?
Yeah, so I got into like ultra running
Mm-hmm.
last year it would have been. So doing these long distance runs out in these trail systems, I had to actually find a way to consume calories but keep it light because I didn't want to carry around a pack or anything like that. So really just like anything that's calorie dense, I really like personally eating dates, any kind of like mixed nuts, trail mix, things like that, or just a little bit of meat to get some protein. So just anything I can pack down really tight. And then I do carry a life straw with me that filters water for you. And then just I also have like on a scouting trip, I'll take like a Sawyer water filtering system where you can actually like fill up creek water. It filters it for you into your water bottle. You can drink it that way. And then the other thing is I just like to take like little electrolyte salt tabs with me and just to try to keep that because like the thing I've learned from the ultra running that I've taken over into scouting is that you need to have a high calorie intake before you start feeling tired, because like if you start feeling tired, you start feeling weak, it's already too late. And obviously it's a little bit different when you're just walking around the woods or you're not in a race or anything like that, but you just want to stay on top of it. And I found the simpler the better, and I just look for those calorie dense things I can pack away easy and just hop in while I'm out there walking.
Let me tell you, dates. I didn't know they were that good until my mother-in-law made. They were they're like peanut butter eggs, but they were, instead of peanut butter, it was like
Oh
with
yeah.
dates inside of it. And me and my
Yeah.
wife were like, those are gonna be disgusting.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, they're gonna taste like a Snickers. I'm like, no, they're not. There's no way. There's no way. I ate them
Light
all.
range forever.
Yeah, I ate them all, and I was like, these are amazing.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and
a
then
go-to right there, man. That's a good snack.
chocolate covered dates.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, like that is a go-to now. Like that is,
Yeah.
I have to get some more of them. But I also have a life straw. I need like this trip. I'm definitely gonna take that with me. Definitely
Yeah.
gonna pack some dates because that's actually a good point. I'm gonna take some dates. But the salt, what was the packets you said you took? The
They're just like
electrolytes?
little electrolyte tabs.
Okay.
They're basically just loaded with salt is all that it is.
okay.
So you can get them in a lot of different forms, a lot of different vitamin stores, Amazon, like everywhere has them. They have little chewable tablets. They have little capsules, just multiple different ways, but just a way to keep your electrolytes boosted to give you that energy as you're kind of rolling around through the woods out there.
Yeah, I could have used that. So Sunday here, this past Sunday, it was 91 degrees, and my wife
Oh,
gave
yeah.
me the green light to go out and scout. But I was like, you know what? I got to pull some cameras in an area that I'm not actually going to ever hunt. So I put 7 miles on. I I got all the cameras pulled, and I ran out of water with 2 miles left to go out. That was, and I thought of Ryan Glitsky's thing where he was like, I started getting the chills and my head started hurting, and I was like, I literally the last 2 miles I felt that, like I was like getting
Yeah.
chills. Like, so yeah, make sure you take some water out there with you and
Yeah.
some food.
Hydrate and taking some calories, that's for sure.
I was conserving like this much water.
Yeah.
I was like, once I get up to this bend right here, I'll take another little sip. So I took another little sip, and I was like, once I get in the parking lot, then I'll take another sip. Dude, that was like the worst, honestly. Like, oh god, and I had 2 ticks on me too. Yeah, terrible. I hate summer scouting. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it. It's just-
Ethan, anything else before we end it? I know you soaked this one in because I feel
really
like
soaked this
you need
one
to
in.
e-scout more.
This was a soaking, not
Yep.
a lot of
I don't blame
talking
you.
episode for
I
me.
knew it would be.
Now I'm really, because like I said, I'm going to the cabin next weekend, and I'm going to be doing a lot of e-scouting over the
Yep.
next week because I know, like I said, I have that trail cam in the pool, and I know I'm going to want to walk around a bit just to, because I know it's so different. I mean, now it's end of June, July. There's plenty of vegetation, and then when you go up in the fall, it all looks different, but still, you still go out and do things. So, yeah, I'll be taking a lot of this knowledge and taking it up north with me.
Yeah.
Good. Greg, drop where people can follow you at. Reach out to you if you have any questions. All that kind of good stuff, man.
Yeah. Instagram, my handle is Greg_Whitetail_partners. And then my email is greg@whitetailpartners.com. Most active in those 2 places. So if you want to dive into any maps, look at anything, just feel free to reach out. I always love lending a helping hand anywhere I can.
Cool, man. Well,
Sweet.
really appreciate you come on here again. It's a pleasure talking to you again. I think we'll try and have you on again at some
Yeah,
point.
man. That sounds great.
Or if you come to PA, I don't know, one of the 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can do an in-studio one next
Oh,
time.
dude,
that
that'd
would
be
be awesome.
sick.
They're always
That'd
the
be
best.
sick. They're always the best.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone, remember to keep hunting.
Keep fishing.
Enjoy the freaking process.